And hello, good afternoon. For those of you who have joined us on this sunny day where I'm sitting out in Pisa in Tuscany, you are joining the 11th webinar for ICTfootprint.eu, a Horizon 2020 coordination and support action supported by the European Commission, which looks to deliver a European framework initiative for energy and environmental efficiency in the ICT sector. Today's webinar is entitled Sustainable ICT, Achieve More with Less, the experience of circular computing, catalyst and best practice data centers. So before we go into the details, I'd like to tell you and share with you who our speakers are today. They are Steve Haskew, who's a strategic commercial manager from Circular Computing, Mark Acton, who's also one of our external advisory group experts within ICT Footprint, who's the head of data center technical consulting, CBRE's global data center solutions. And then we have Vasiliki Georgiadou, we'll call her Vicky for today, thank you, who's a project manager of the Catalyst project. I'm Silvana Masella. I will be your moderator for the next hour. I'm the founder, CEO of Trust IT Services. We coordinate the ICT Footprint project, which I'd like to say just a few words about before we start. So it's a 36-month project. We are in our final phases of the support action. And the reason we got funded was because the Commission wanted to have a project that helped consolidate and raise awareness around some ICT methodologies that had been put together in the past by industry and standard development organizations. And our job was to raise awareness on these methodologies, showcase best practices, and understand what tools and services were out in Europe primarily, in understanding how we could measure our energy and environmental efficiency, specifically in the ICT sector, and to help facilitate the deployment of innovative tools, services, and applications in this area. There are 3 partners involved. Our company, which is an SME, Deloitte Sustainability in Paris, that looks specifically around life cycle assessments, and Eurocities, based in Belgium, but which is a large network of cities that look also into understanding environmental issues and how they can support ICT efforts. We have a set of stakeholders that are listed here as well. So some results so far. We've managed in these past months to bring together a like-minded and strong community around trying to lowering our carbon footprint around ICT. So we have over 5,000 community members. We have a marketplace where it's divided up between suppliers and buyers. I mentioned an advisory group who deal with specific issues around green ICT, and Mark is one of our members we have in today's webinar. We've had a paper published in a scientific event proceedings. We have 2 tools, one that's out already and another is being fine-tuned, and we have some services around certification around a self-assessment tool. So it's a user-friendly tool that helps you assess how green ICT you are. We have 44 success stories, a dynamic interactive map of ICT standards with 20 corresponding fact sheets. And then we've also put together 11 webinars. They're all pre-recorded, and you can go on our ICT Footprint .eu website and download and listen to them in the past. And we have an active presence. Have had an active presence in different events. So I've gone through some of the results already. I won't go through them again. These are our main assets of the project. And if you think those of you listening to today's webinar, you think you have a best practice in sustainable ICT, then please do contact us after the webinar. We'd be happy to listen to what you have produced and see if we can try and showcase you on the website. A few details around our presence and who our community, who makes up our community at the moment. So you can see they're all like-minded individuals and representatives. So it's a relatively key and targeted community. So if you do write or you do showcase something that you do have on offer, it's going to get and reach to the right people. As I said, in these days, we're fine-tuning a self-assessment tool where it's going to help organizations, primarily ICT intensive organizations, to make better informed decisions on making your ICT sustainable and energy efficient. And here you have the URL link at the top of the presentation where you can download and complete this in less than 15 minutes. Want to learn more about the project and how you can get involved, then support us and come to ICT 2018, which is happening in Vienna this 4th and 6th of December. We have a networking session as well as an exhibition stand. So if there's anything you'd like us to showcase for you, this is a very high profile event. Around 2,000 to 3,000 people attend, all engaged in ICT efforts. So it's a good visibility for us, and it can be also for you. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker for the webinar. Again, and that would be Steve Haskew, who's the Commercial Manager for Circular Computing. He sits on the steering committee for the BSI, the British Standard Institute, where recently ISO adopted the BSI 88887 standard, a remanufacturing standard specifically in the field of computer technology, so very related to what we're talking about today. And he's an experienced board-level all-rounder with a demonstrated history of working on innovative and disruptive environments. So please, Steve, we very much look forward to hearing your presentation on sustainable IT. Do you know the true cost? Thank you.
That's a very strong introduction. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I will try and speak slowly. If English isn't your first language and you're unsure of what you're hearing, then I'm sure you can just type in a question and they can answer it at the hub. We want to talk about today sustainable IT and do you know the true cost? The presentation won't last for too long, but it will hopefully leave you with some questions that you need to ask yourself. I believe that in asking yourself the better question, you'll get a better answer. And clearly, to get the results that we need from a sustainability point of view, I believe we need to ask stronger questions of ourselves for the organizations that we work with to affect impact and change. So who we are as a business, Circular Computing is part of a larger organization that was established pre-internet. So we're 25 plus years old. We happen to have been semi-circular for that time, so meaning that we provided a disposal and remarketing service for large users of IT who were, without knowing it, jumping onto a linear treadmill of take, make, and use for IT, predominantly driven by the large software and hardware OEMs. As technology began to establish itself, what we found, though, come 2013, was Moore's law kind of became true. Sorry about that. Where thin was thin enough and fast was fast enough, a laptop needs to disperse its heat as being its main problem, and predominantly technology nowadays is a window to the cloud, and so we found that frankly we could take enterprise grade products that were coming off lease, that may be 3 years old. We invested in a remanufacturing factory to provide the new grade. So what we learned with people who are buying anything but brand new is they don't have an ability to understand what risk looks like really, and as such, they were kind of compromised in their decision making. So our product gets a complete cosmetic overhaul with an SSD as standard. We have a deal which is fairly unique with Duracell. So supplying a new battery with our product was a user-driven decision rather than a manufacturing one. They wanted to not have the compromise, which is completely understandable. Our machines come supplied through a 3-year warranty. They're all distributed through circular partners on a global basis. We deliver a new grade of IT, so we sit between new and second-hand. See, can you still hear me? Can you hear me okay, Mark?
Yeah, we can hear you well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yes,
Okay.
loud and clear.
Yes, no problem.
Steve.
Okay. So we are what we deem to be a secondary equipment manufacturer. So what does that actually look like to the users? What that actually means is that we're able to deliver an experience similar to that of an original equipment manufacturer. The second-hand market is generally misunderstood by a lot of people, but what is certain is that if you wanted to order 10,000 of the same SKU in the second-hand market until circular came along, you wouldn't be able to do that. So the market exists on 5 of this, 10 of that, 4 of the other, 102 of this. It doesn't provide a foundation from which the sales supply chain can build a strategy, and as such, until recently, has been discounted. And of course, for every new laptop in our world, for every new laptop that is sold, a second-hand one is put into the market, is disposed of, and generally they are resold. So there is a huge second-hand market, and what we've been able to do is to establish ourselves as the first secondary equipment manufacturer. And part of our ethos as circular computing is not only to provide a circular economy business model for our clients, we also, as our call of duty, plant 5 trees for every laptop that we sell. That in itself produces a CO2 compound effect, and we present ourselves as being a carbon neutral laptop environment for the user. So we take care of the originally produced CO2, the in-use phase for our customers, and the remanufacturing of the product. So those 5 trees takes care of that. And if anybody wants any information about that, please contact the organisers here, and they can get in touch. So the net effect looks something like this. Our education goes into, on the outside of this slide, you see our investment into India, where we educate villages to look after, from a nurturing and nurturing point of view, our trees. That creates an income for them, that they're able to be less vulnerable. The center screen is a project that we support in Zambia, which is with Samson and his village, where we buy man-made beehives. We put those into the trees. The bees come. The bees make honey. The honey makes money, and Samson and his village can go and then trade with neighbouring villages. And that for us is sort of end-to-end sustainability. We provide products into, say, the European market. We provide an income into otherwise vulnerable societies. We're able to educate them about sustainability, and we're able to educate our clients about such as well. So the big question I want to ask, I suppose, is the word sustainability. What does it mean to you and your company? Do you know if you're aligned with the company, or are you pulling in different directions? When we go and do corporate workshops, my mouse here should be seen. We have the IT team that have a strategy that they're trying to adopt, and then we have sustainability on the right, who generally have a different agenda. They might be aligned, but generally these two teams don't really talk to each other. What we find, though, in our experience, is that the common denominator between these two teams is the chief finance officer. So generally, the sustainability guys are C-suite people who have the FD as their boss. Who obviously the FD will then pass down the budget to the ICT teams, and then ask them to squeeze as much value out of their budget as they possibly can It's generally how that works. What we try and do is bring these two teams together, have a conversation, and then try and make them share the, or not make them, but try and flush out what sustainability means to IT. But one of the core parts within the sustainability engine would be energy. And so when we look at energy, we consider three parts to it. We have the energy in product production, we have the energy in the use, and we have the energy in disposal. Predominantly are the three pillars for energy within a laptop environment. The question would be, which one do you value most as a user? And I'm going to bet my money on probably number two, the energy in use, which is the one that will have the greatest impact to you today. But what I want to try and demonstrate is, if you consider the actual values involved, where, say, a circular computer has a 40% cost reduction equaling maybe 300 euros at the front end, and when we asked to look at these footprint savings, so if you look at, I guess, the T440 here, it requires 9 kilos of CO2 produced to be in operation, i.e. the energy it consumes from the grid, against 330 kilos in production. You need to take a view, I suppose, as to how important saving €1, €1 or €2, or even if that number was 381, if it was zeroed out and you used it for 3 years, you're going to be saving 10 or 12 euros for the one unit. You factor that against the maybe 300 or 400 euro saving on a circular computer, and then you look at the actual carbon produced in production as opposed to using something that's already been made. The imbalance needs to be kind of discussed and tabled, and then a strategy can be made. So what we then say with regards to sustainability is are you being asked to compromise when buying sustainable IT? Is this relevant to you? Are you qualified to answer? Do you know how to define the question, i.e. what is sustainable IT? So those three things are important, because if you are being asked to compromise, then that's one reason not to buy a solution other than what's being presented under the guise of new. If you're not being asked to compromise, then you need to consider other factors in your decision making. But certainly, the stronger questions need to be asked. And only when you've defined what's in it for me and my company will you be able to answer, therefore, can I afford to consider sustainability? And more to the point, can I afford not to consider sustainability? So one of the big drivers is perhaps not looking within yourself or within your organization, but looking wider and what's actually happening to the world, say with ocean plastics, or say with CO2 production, and say with people in Asia maybe walking around with masks on, but not over here in Europe. You know, we're very privileged over here that we get a use and to not worry about it. Whereas if we're only looking at our own internal and intrinsic values, perhaps that isn't the right question to be asking. So with circular, what we try and do, we try and approach things from the other end. So we look at the user experience. We try and create this positive social, ethical, environmental impacts that unites the user feeling good about their experience, that they feel they're part of an organization that cares genuinely, and that because it's a product they use every day, should mean something to them. So the experience that we're trying to create is that of sustainable IT, but sustainable first and IT second. So what we look at is trying to understand the agenda of the IT and finance teams, and there's a few things that are important to them. We then look at the sustainability teams and what's important to them. And on the sustainability side, you know, the way that the things have unfolded over the last 2 years, we've seen green bonds, we've seen impact investors wanting and demanding companies to be more sustainable, and this is a slam dunk for most sustainability teams. And circular computing just sort of wraps that experience as an all-encompassing one. But again, what's important from my point of view, other than the mobile phone, I think a laptop is probably one of the most widely used bits of technology that everyone will use day to day. And so we have a duty to educate through the product, I think. And that's me done. Thank you for your time.
Steve, that was brilliant. Thank you very, very much. I know we have you to thank for the We Forest link as well, which is just super. I think the feature around sustainability is, we work quite a bit on, research and innovation projects in ICT, and it's an element that is clearly one of the most important. Tackling it from your point of view in bringing in the whole of the ecosystem inside a team is a very nice way of dealing with it, and I don't think this is picked up enough, when working around predominantly just ICT projects. This take on it is not really picked up on, and I'm certainly going to deal with that next time I'm working on the sustainability features of any type of ICT project. Just a couple of, so I don't know if you find that's the same thing, Steve, or you deal with it all the time. But this it's a really, sorry, go on.
No. I think it's great that you've said what you said. I think it's really important that we take what's the words I'm looking for. What I love about the sustainability groups and networks that I'm involved with is that there is no downside to what they're trying to achieve at all. It's only positive, and somewhat they're frustrated that they don't know how to ask the right questions of the right teams, because the larger the organization, if you take green public procurement, in our world, they represent 20% of all purchases. If you consider the volume of laptops made annually are 160 million, the public sector is liable for 32 million. That would calculate. So they have a huge responsibility to kind of figure this out really quickly. As suppliers, we have a huge responsibility, therefore, to help them, if we believe in sustainability, to help them get to the answers more quickly.
And in fact, that leads me, it's not one of the questions I wanted to ask you, but it might be nice if you were to organise, I don't know if you have, Steve, organise a meeting with Digit. It's the Directorate General in the European Commission that deals with all IT, and they clearly interface with all public bodies in EU27. Having a presentation from you made to them would be quite a timely and important thing to do, and also give rise to perhaps thinking of setting aside specific funds under Horizon Europe, the new framework programme, once Horizon 2020 finishes, on these features alone, especially as green public procurement is taking off big time. I know it's going to be quite a bit of money involved under Horizon Europe, and this probably would be nice visibility for your organisation as well.
That would be incredible, by the way. That would be incredible.
Yeah, so we make a note of that, and see, let's, if you need some contacts there, then we can also oblige from that point of view. But that's, I think putting this on a much higher level, I think is important. I think I'll just ask perhaps one question, if I may, Steve, before going on to the next speaker. And that's probably the challenges involved for organisations. What do they face when they're trying to proactively adopt a sustainable IT procurement strategy?
I like your question, because it's probably the one thing that is the hardest to answer. But I guess the three key things for me would look like this. One is the strategy to date, let's call it to date, has been to buy new. And by the way, the guys that sell you, the OEMs like Dell, HP, Lenovo, Apple, they are doing the best job they can within the realms of sustainability in how they currently operate without being too disruptive. So hats off to them. However, for those looking for a sustainability like we provide, the big question is you have the IT teams who understand the risk involved in buying new. No one got fired for buying new. So when the sustainability guys come over and speak to the IT guys are like, well, you know what? you take the bullet if what you're proposing it lets me down and the organisation operationally takes a hit. So there's that bit of risk needs to be defined. The second part is when you move away from anything but new. The next part is how do you if I take green public procurement as a great example, and they need 3 bids of product, how do you differentiate between something that's not new and something that's not new, if that makes sense? So your second-hand car, you might say, is grade A. My second-hand car is also grade A, but the person that's making a decision on which one to buy doesn't know who is grade A and who's not grade A, if that makes sense. So what we've had to do with circular computing is differentiate ourselves by being the first remanufacturer and not refurbisher. But that also creates a few problems, because all of a sudden we have a monopoly on remanufacturing within ICT, which goes against the code of conduct, if you like, of procurement policy. We can't have a monopoly. It must be a fair purchasing environment. So that's another something that we're trying to figure out.
Very good, Steve. Thank you very much for that very articulated response, and thank you again for your presentation. Without further ado, we'll move on to our second speaker for the webinar, and that is Mark Acton, who is the head of Data Center Technical Consulting at CBRE's Global Data Center Solutions. He will today present standards and best practices related to ICT sustainability, particularly in relation to data centers. I don't have this here, but I believe, Mark, you still have this role. Correct me if I'm not wrong. Are you still the chair of the EU Code of Conduct Working Group?
Yes, that's right, I am. Yeah.
Okay, so that's obviously a great role and nice European vision on perspectives from a policy point of view, and that's great that you've been able to support us today, as well as with your hat as being an external advisory group member for ICT Footprint. So over to you, Mark, and we look forward to hearing your presentation today. Thank you.
Thanks, Silvana, and thanks everybody for listening. So yes, at the outset, it's probably worth me saying that my focus is not on ICT generally, but merely the data center element of ICT. So those services and products and of course hardware that sits inside data centers. And what I'm going to try to do today is give you a little bit of a view of the standards landscape that informs sustainability. And I think in particular, one or two things that you can particularly reference and use in your day-to-day jobs in terms of potentially reducing your environmental footprint. So with that said, let's move on. I'm going to do a lot of this on the background of the work that Sensenelec is doing. As Steve mentioned, he's obviously working with BSI in the UK. I also work with BSI on another committee. But all the national committees basically feed up into a central European body called Senelec, who are responsible for electrotechnical standardization. So a lot of what you're going to see today comes out of Senelec in terms of those committees, those pan-European committees, trying to give us all the opportunity for greater understanding, KPIs, but also best practices around both energy efficiency and sustainability. The specific one I'm probably going to talk about today is something called the EN 5600 series, which is very data center specific. So I apologize for that for anybody who's not involved in data centers. But obviously, I think we all recognize that data centers are a huge component now of the ICT landscape. Everything seems to go back to a data center in some way or another, whatever service we're using, both in our businesses or our social life. If you do want more information on the standards landscape, there is a link on that fourth bullet to the Green Data Center Coordination Group. Very, very useful set of documents which are free. So again, anybody that wants to follow this up can have a look at those documents and probably understand a little bit more about the background. It does go beyond sustainability and energy efficiency, but nonetheless probably worth having a check if you're working in that area. So 5600, what is it and why is it important? Well, 5600 is a standard. It's a new European standard, therefore an international standard which focuses on data centers. Again, EN 5600 is owned and developed by Senelec, TC215, which is again a European body. And the most important thing, I think, probably in this area is that final bullet. So there has been a significant change in the last 6 months whereby EN 5600 has been adopted by ISO IEC. ISO IEC have literally taken a copy of the 5600 series documents and converted them into an ISO IEC technical supplement with a number of 22237. Why is that important, and why am I going on about it? Well, the important thing there is that for data centers, we've had something of a challenge trying to define what sustainability and what energy efficiency actually look like. We've had a number of competing standards out there, all of whom have claimed that they represent goodness. The reality is a lot of those claims are spurious, invalid even, and some are being made by commercial organizations. So with the publication of an ISO IEC based on a genuine international European standard, we will finally have a benchmark and a set of KPIs that allow us to understand to some degree what we're doing. It will also allow us to compare how well we're doing against others potentially. So increasingly, we're actually getting a landscape where there is a benchmark, there's a consistent benchmark, and a benchmark that we all understand. And that's, I think, why this is important, and why I'm probably going on about it. So what does this series actually look like? What are we actually looking at? It's a series of documents, as most standard series are. The most important one probably is the top one, 5600-1, which basically explains what the standards are all about. I'm going to gloss over the next series, the section 2. What that really deals with is principally the building itself and the infrastructure within that building, both the power, the cooling, cooling's environmental control on that slide, telecommunications, cabling, physical security, and really go down to the next level, the KPIs and the management piece, which is, I think, really where this seminar, this presentation particularly is focused. It is important to look at what's happening at the building level and how we're building buildings, but the KPIs that are being referenced there, so document 4-1, 4-2, 4-3, are all ultimately about sustainability and energy efficiency. So power usage effectiveness is not an energy efficiency metric, as some people might claim in the data center. However, it does indicate the effectiveness with which you're delivering power from the building into the IT load that the building is supporting. So it's important. It's not a measure of efficiency, but it certainly is a measure of how effective your building is at actually delivering its power to the IT equipment and indeed removing heat. Renewable energy factor, though, is actually something that sort of addresses more sustainability. So renewable energy factor really talks about the amount of renewable energy that you're using in your data center compared to non-renewable energy. So basically, that is going to be more sustainable energy. Therefore, it is without doubt, a sustainability or an environmental sustainability indicator. So well worth referencing. A key element of these KPIs, some of which are in development and some of which have actually been developed, is that, again, these are based on ISO IEC standards. So the ISO IEC numbers that you see on the right-hand side define to all of us globally how we should be measuring PUE, how we should be measuring REF. And again, that's why it's important that we have these global standardized benchmarks, because without them, frankly, we're not even talking the same language. The final two documents I'd like to touch on, they're called TR 5600 documents, which are technical reports. 99-1 and 99-2 are basically a set of recommended practices which essentially give guidelines as to how you can directly save energy or improve your environmental sustainability within data centers. And given that a data center can consume, in some cases 120 megawatts of power or so on an instantaneous basis, this is important. And the consumption and usage of data centers is growing. So, this is key for all of us. So again, those two documents give very, very clear recommendation guidelines, best practices, which help you to improve either your energy efficiency or reduce your environmental footprint. So very, very important documents which we can all take advantage of and use if we're operating in a data center environment. Silvana mentioned the EU Code of Conduct best practices, which Silvana is absolutely right. Yes, that's something I help produce and actually chair the committee that produces the document revisions on an annual basis. But all of those best practices and guidelines have actually been incorporated into the 99-1 document that you can see there. So you can actually go and download the Code of Conduct best practices free from the JRC website, or you can use it as an included element within the broader 5600 series. So again, the idea with standards is they build on each other, they relate to each other, they create those that consistency and those benchmarks across an industry sector, or indeed, across many industry sectors. I'm going to go to the next slide. This just gives you an idea, if you're looking at the documents, what to look for. So the 99-1 and 99-2 documents, I think, are absolutely key. These are things that you should definitely look out for, because if you are in a position where you can apply them in a data center, you will save both money and improve your environmental sustainability. So in the sense of a data center, we're in a win-win situation. We can do the right thing and actually save money at the same time. So obviously a focus for all of us. ISO, I mention ISO because, again, ISO are becoming increasingly focused on data centers. They are taking on board the requirement for a data center, a set of data center KPIs in particular, and actually a data center standard that we can all reference. The really important thing about that is that, again, it gives us that benchmark, and it gives us that common ground and common language to all use. And the work they're currently doing, the work they're currently focused on, are things like carbon usage effectiveness. So basically what we're trying to do is measure our carbon impact from data centers and find out how we can improve that and how we can reduce the carbon footprint. And that's both in the use phase and in the production phase. Steve talked about the production phase of laptops earlier. Well, we're trying to do exactly the same thing for data centers. And obviously, if you're pouring concrete, you're building big electrical and cooling infrastructure, then that's a significant element that needs to be considered. So that's something that's actually in progress at the moment. It's not been finished, so I can't give you a number. Same with water usage effectiveness. To clean water costs energy. To move water around costs energy. So it is a significant element, and in some parts of the world, obviously, water is a very much more precious resource. I'm fortunate I live in the UK. We have plenty of water. Other parts of the world have clearly less water and have required to consume more energy, providing certainly potable water. And then energy reuse. That's something in data centers that we're focused on. Data centers consume a huge amount of energy in the form of electricity. They produce huge amounts of heat. Typically, we reject that heat to the atmosphere. We throw it away. If there's a way of reusing that heat, obviously we will improve our sustainability by definition. We're preventing other people potentially from having to consume energy or consume fuel to produce energy. So again, these are all areas that are absolutely key to sustainability and are a focus, an ongoing focus for the standards efforts, both by Sensenelec in Europe, but also increasingly by ISO IEC on a global basis. Something that is relatively recent, so EMAS is something that you may have heard about, the Eco Management and Audit Scheme, something that's actually being has been developed by JRC, so part of the European Commission. The significant thing about EMAS is both that it aligns with existing ISO standards, so global standards like 14040 and 14044, which relate to life cycle assessment. So again, EMAS is out there referencing the ISO standards, but highly importantly, and to sort of complete the circle, the EMAS BEMP, so the best environmental management practices, actually do refer to both the best practices from the EU Code of Conduct and also the EN 5600 99-1 document. So basically they are referring to those same best practices. So they are now becoming the standard, if you want, the guidelines that should be adopted within a data center environment if you're actually going through the eco management and audit scheme, which is a voluntary scheme at the moment, but obviously as these things go, it may become less voluntary as time moves on. So we've talked about 14,001, just basically there as a reference point, and the next slide gives you essentially the relationship between EMAS and 14,001. As I said, EMAS was written very much on the basis of trying to take advantage of what's already out there from ISO, which is again a recognized standard, make use of it, but also reference it as well so that people can actually, again, work within a known framework. Next slide, again, talk briefly about the life cycle side of things, the LCA side, life cycle assessment, ISO 14040 or 14040, I can never quite get it right. One of the significant things about the life cycle assessment standard is, again, that it aligns with ISO 14001, but also ISO 9001. So again, you can see the standards world, the standards community tries to bring the standards together, tries to reference standards so that we are in a very sort of comprehensive framework where we can actually reference each other's work. And again, just to go back into it, EMAS does reference the life cycle assessment guidelines. It is relevant. And in some respects, having EMAS represent or recognize and use the best practices that have been developed by the Code of Conduct and actually are also now within 5600 actually helps to some degree to underpin what's happening with the LCA, with life cycle assessment. A little bit of a hurried presentation. Hopefully you found it useful and not too hurried. And that's pretty much me done, unless there are any questions. Thank you.
Hello, Mark?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, sorry, we just had a slight... Luckily, thank you very much for that. I just missed the last 3 minutes, I'm afraid. So I think as an SME, yeah, this is me, and this is all great, and we always know that clearly standards lead to fantastic interoperability and support sustainability. But one of the issues we had for ICT Footprint was to try to wade our way through masses of documents. In a nutshell, there are so many standards, aren't there?
Yeah,
what,
there are.
in your opinion, should be the ones I start with?
That's a really good question, and yes, it is a minefield. You know, and some standards aren't up to date. Some standards aren't particularly relevant anymore. They're in a continual process of change. I think the trouble is that the subject's so incredibly broad. I mean, just on the basis of you know, Steve's obviously presented a sustainability element largely from let's say a laptop perspective. I've done it from a data center perspective. There's any number of devices in between those two, including, you know, phones and tablets and whatever that you can also include in there. I think the only thing you can really do is look at your specific area of control where you can actually make a difference and apply those standards that relate specifically to your area. And that's really, for me, the good thing about data centers is because we had nothing in that area up until probably 18 months ago. So now we actually have something we can start to apply. There will be something out there, without question, for your area of responsibility. Yeah, so you know, my challenge is go out and look for it and see what's relevant. But it is a minefield, you're right.
Oh yeah, I mean, the argument is my fantastic map on the ICT methodologies on ICT Footprint should give me that info, but we don't have clearly that. Clearly doesn't cover anything. Can you hear me, Mark?
I can, yes. I can, and I agree. If only it were that simple.
Yeah, exactly. Based on that, I want to conclude. I won't ask any more questions. I'll go to our third speaker, but I will conclude on one part which is related, and it's something we're also involved in, and that's the Stand ICT. This is a project that also allows European experts to acquire funding around different topic areas around the digital single market 5 pillars, and the environmental energy and ICT is one of them. So within this network that we're speaking with now, there's funding to be had in small grants for up to €8,000, which is something, yeah, if you're usually working on a sort of pro bono effort a lot of the time in terms of trying to get through best practices or specs in standards bodies. So standict.eu, there are calls opened all the time, and Rita's actually put this into the chat for everybody. So please go and have a look at that. Respond, because it's a very nice opportunity to be had for people who want to acquire funding in their standards work. And with that, Mark, I'd like to thank you very much for that presentation.
Thank you.
And move on to our third and final speaker for the webinar, and that's Vasiliki Georgiadou. We're going to call you Vicky. Thank you very much. She works at Green IT Amsterdam. She focuses on promoting and realizing energy sustainability initiatives within the IT industry, and especially related to the data center sector. And she's going to zoom in on a Horizon 2020 European funded project called Catalyst. And you're going to introduce to us today the assessment toolkit that you've put together. So without further ado, Vicky, the floor is yours. Thank you. Vicky, can you hear us? Vicky, I think you need to unmute your microphone. Let's see, just bear with us, all of you, when we can get Vicky online. Vicky, can you hear us? Have we lost you? I hope not. Now, I can't see Vicky in the list of participants either. And no, she's... Okay, Vasil, yes, you're here. We can see you, but you have your microphone muted. So if you can change that from red to green. We can't change that for you, unfortunately, because you have the rights at the moment. Except where? No, ti è stato assegnato. Bear with us, sorry, we've not disappeared. We're just trying to get Vicky onto the call for her presentation. Bear with us, please. Thank you very much. And we do apologise for this delay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
Vicky,
can now.
Hello?
we can now. Yes,
Hi,
hello there.
Hi, it's unbelievable, but for some reason my laptop is completely stuck, and I have a frozen
It's green. So shall we
Green.
go forward with your presentation, Vicky? We'll change the slides for you,
Yes,
shall we? Yes,
yes,
that's no
and
problem.
perhaps I can just ask you to move on with the slides.
Yes,
Is that going to be okay? Okay.
that will be fine, Vicky.
So I'm so sorry for this. I
Don't
don't know what
worry.
happened. The moment
Don't worry. No
that
problem.
my presentation started, everything frozen. So should I
Okay,
start
Vicky,
or?
over to you. Yes. So your title is The Catalyst Introduces the Green Data Center Assessment Toolkit. Over to you, Vicky. Thank you very much. I did give the introduction of who you were before.
Oh, perfect.
Perfect.
Yes. Once again, apologies for these technical difficulties. And thanks, Silvana, for the introduction and, of course, the opportunity to talk about our efforts in the field. Actually, I'm going to be building a little bit upon Mark's story on the data center standard. And perhaps after my presentation, we will have a better direction on how to navigate through the ever-growing landscape. And going a little bit back to what Steve mentioned on whether in a company or organization we can afford to think about sustainability or not. So I'm going to argue here that when it comes to data centers, we need to move beyond energy efficiency. We have to start tackling the issue of sustainability in data centers in terms of environmental performance and impact. So if you see my first slide, I'm not going to say something new when I mention that data center demand is decreasing. That is because our data, we produce data, we transfer, we process with every single thing almost that we do in our daily lives. But at the same time, we must be conscious of how we use the primary energy sources. So, for example, here in the Netherlands, the national government is sworn off completely natural gas by 2050. And these kind of developments are actually forcing us to think about smarter ways of integrating our infrastructure, such as the digital and the energy, and actually starting to exploit the very nature of IT equipment at the crossroads of data, electricity, and heat networks. Essentially, ICT with the data centers representing their hubs can support energy grids, both electricity and heat, in the effort to become even more sustainable. And if you go to the third slide, I'm presenting our organization, Green IT Amsterdam, which is essentially what we do as a non-profit organization. We support the Amsterdam wider region to meeting its energy transition goals. So with the help and active contribution of our participants and partners, we scout new technologies and business models. We set up pilots to test and validate them in order to make sure that we can replicate and those pilots and we can scale them up. And in this way, create new business opportunities. So in the next slide, I'm going to be talking today about one of the projects we have been working over the last year, which is a European Union project funded by the recent financial funding program AIDS 2020, the so-called Catalyst. And as you can see on the fourth slide, should be now, Catalyst envision data centers as energy hubs that offer flexibility services to both smart grids and heating networks. Moving to the next slide, the name itself of Catalyst stands for Converting Data Centers in Energy Flexibility Ecosystem. And the difference between this project and the previous one is that this is really an innovation project. We are taking the previously developed tools from a research and development projects like Geyser and Dolphin that they were funded from a European Union's FP7 program. We are improving these tools, methodology, and models in order to make them ready for market adoption. The project's consortium, as you can see in the graphic on slide 5, is geographically distributed across Europe. and of course spans the whole spectrum of stakeholders around data centers, including not only data center operators, engineering, and end users, but also utilities such as NLX in Italy, and grid operators such as Alliander in the Netherlands, and of course the research community. Can you still hear me? Because I can't really get any feedback.
Yeah, Vicky, yes, we can hear you. I think you're a bit faint, I'm afraid, but yes, we can hear you. You're still on the slide with the partner organisations of Catalyst
yes,
project.
Slide number 5.
Right. Okay.
Yes,
So we've gone
number
ahead.
5.
All right.
Yeah. So moving on to slide 6. I'm actually here presenting the premise based on which we are working, and the concept here is that we perceive electricity, heat, and IT load as commodities that data centers can trade in their respective markets. So in this way, Catalyst Vision introduces a marketplace as a service concept. So we have 3 marketplaces then: the electricity marketplace between data centers and electricity stakeholders to trade electricity generation, storage, resiliency, flexibility services. We have the heating marketplace between data center and heat stakeholders to trade heat and cooling. And of course, the IT load marketplace that we're introducing, which will be automated and expanded with secure and traceable IT contracts between federated data centers to cover not only cloud performance and elasticity, but also to support energy efficiency, cooling cost reduction, and regional smart grid stability. On the next slide, slide number 7, I'm just presenting here very fast the conceptual model of the architecture of the Catalyst. What you need to understand from here essentially is that it's a whole technological and business tree, it's a whole framework. And from this framework, we are developing, we are actually improving the tools that have already been developed by previous research and development projects. We don't do something new, we don't reinvent the wheel. In order to make it possible to use and trade the residual heat from data centers, to assess resiliency of energy supplies and flexibility, to deliver energy flexibility services to the surrounding grids, to exploit the migration of traceable IT load. And what do I mean by that? Essentially, we want to move the IT load demand to where there is a surplus of renewable energy source or where there is a need for heat. And this is what I mean by saying follow the energy on slide number 7. The framework is adaptable to a broad variety of data center categories, ranging from different types: colocation, enterprise, high performance, different geographical locations, as is evident also by the makeup of the consortium, different architectures, large centralized versus fully centralized data centers. But then how are we going to evaluate our efforts and results? If we move on to slide number 8, I kind of give you there a snapshot of the landscape on the data center metrics and KPIs. As you have already mentioned, Silvana, a while ago, it is quite daunting. In a project that now is completed, and I'm pretty sure that perhaps Silvana and Mark have already familiar with the 8th 2020 project Eureka. We have worked also as the United Amsterdam on this project, and we have taken the study and the extensive research that was done in this project when it comes to the KPIs and the different standards, organizations and government and industrial initiatives. And for a company of just 20 years or so, there are way too many of them. So taking the work here in Eureka as a starting point, in the Catalyst project, we are developing the Green Data Center Assessment Toolkit to select the metrics and the KPIs that measure various sustainability elements, to put it together, to consolidate them in a comprehensive and easy to use process to better navigate this ever-growing landscape. So in the next couple of slides, slide number 9 and slide number 10, I'm actually just listing the metrics and KPIs that we have selected for the toolkit in Catalyst project. And one of the main selection criterion was that the measurement methodology and computational formula of the metric should be well defined. So we opted for metrics that are well known and accepted in practice by the industry, and it shouldn't come as a surprise that the main source of information is EN 5600, because it consolidates all the accepted knowledge so far in a very also comprehensive way, and we think that it is the way to move forward. Nevertheless, and this is quite evident on slide 10, not all environmental aspects are covered by EN 5600 simply because the standardization process takes too much time, and the timeline is very different from the innovation that is coming in the industry. So taking Catalyst as a starting point, as an example, we needed to introduce certain metrics that are better appointed to report or say something useful about ideas and concepts that we are introducing in the project, such as flexibility, mechanism, energy, heat reuse, renewable energy sources. And also we wanted to have a slightly more rigorous and scientific, let's say, computation when it comes to reporting savings for primary energy sources and CO2 emissions. So on slide 11, I'm just presenting the main themes of the toolkit, which is a way to support the evaluation and the assessment of the data center in terms of environmental sustainability. Now, in the Catalyst context, the toolkit is nothing more than a set of tools alongside a process to navigate through these tools and showcase their use. Essentially, it is an assembly of building blocks, methods, and processes to help us identify, measure, and assess key performance indicators and metrics that are related to the data center environmental sustainability. And as you can see, we have identified 4 things: renewable energy, heat reuse, energy efficiency infrastructure, and resource management. And in each theme, we have the general ambition that you should look at more something like where you could hope to go for, more like a limit to reach. So for the case of the renewable energy, the ambition is that the energy consumed by the data center facility should come solely from renewable energy sources. On slide 12, you see how the toolkit is introducing the concept of grades, bronze, silver, and gold, and that is based on metrics selected per theme and the granularity and complexity of the measurements for each metric. So the grading system is built up incrementally, enacting a step-by-step plan of action towards the continuous improvement of the environmental performance of the data center. And this is important. It's not just a snapshot. The toolkit is not for just a snapshot. It's a starting point that helps for the continuous improvement. And of course, for the purpose of the toolkit, whenever it's applicable, we follow the methodology and the guidelines as defined in the EN 5600. But we, of course, as Catalyst, because we are also introducing some novel concepts, we had to provide some new metrics, especially when it comes to the flexibility and to heat reuse. So for the heat reuse, we are introducing a single metric for the data center operator to report heat reuse within the data center facility, the so-called in-house reuse factor, ERF, or IRF, sorry. And as the gold level, the heat usage effectiveness, which is a combinatory metric to evaluate solutions, taking into account both the efficiency of the waste heat recovery equipment or strategy, but also the actual heat that is recovered. Perhaps the best way to describe the toolkit is by going through an example or to see how it may work. So on slide 13, I'm taking the theme of renewable energy and showcasing the process that one may follow. So the first step would be to identify the class of the data center, depending on business model, type, services, and so on. At this first edition, we have opted for an
Sorry,
aspect
Vicky, just to
classification.
interrupt. Vicky, can you hear me? Sorry to interrupt you.
Yes.
Oh, just to make sure we've got the right slide showing, the one that's entitled Value Proposition, correct?
No, slide 13 is the example. I'm going through now.
Yeah, because we don't have the same numbering as you, Vicky, I'm afraid. An example of renewable energy.
Yes, that's the
Right.
one. Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
So this is showing just the steps of the process that we are proposing, the workflow that we are proposing in the toolkit. So first we identify the class, and in this edition we have opted for two main classes: the centralized cloud data centers, where we are also including colocation, high performance, hyperscale subclasses, and the edge data center. So we have two modes in the toolkit. In the passive mode, one CP selects the metric they wish to measure and report and provides the current value according to the methodology that we have defined. And if it's a standard, it's according to the EN 5600 methodology. Depending on the metric that is selected, the corresponding grade is given. Now, if one works on the active mode, they should go a step further by selecting either an improved target value of the previously selected metric or a new metric altogether to go to a higher grade. Then, depending on your business objectives, you can explore various options, and this is where EU Code of Conduct comes to give you the guide. So the best practices there, you can see them as options that we are easily associating with the grades suggested by the toolkit. And we can start from the entry level and then moving towards more complex solutions. We can refine or upgrade the ranking of the data center. So for each of these options, we are building a value-added plan. And the focus is on both the timeline change management, how much takes the whole process, and the investment costs associated with performing the necessary actions. Through this value-added plan analysis, one can support the decision-making process on whether it makes sense to eventually go through the changes or not. But I think that I should be concluding with now with my presentation. So moving to the next slide, which is about the value proposition, we really believe that the work that we are doing here with Catalyst at Green IT Amsterdam, the tools and the models that we are developing can provide multiple benefits to all the involved stakeholders, from the data center industry, utilities and grid operators, and of course city policy and decision makers. And going to the next slide, where I mentioned the Green Data Center Stakeholders Group, in order to do all these quite ambitious tasks, in order to perform them satisfactorily, we cannot do it alone. We need to share knowledge, we need to collaborate. And this is why we are establishing, through the Catalyst, the Green Data Center Stakeholders Group, to bring together professionals such as you and people that are following today the webinar from the whole ecosystem to translate the concepts and the pilot results to common reality, essentially. So yeah, I tried to go a little bit fast with my presentation. Essentially, this is what I would like to share at this point. I hope it was clear, even though we had these problems with communication. If you have any questions or remarks or concerns or anything whatsoever, feel free to contact me. The details are on the last slide of my presentation. I don't know, I hope you can see it on your screens now.
Yes,
and
we're
with that, I would
displaying
like
that now,
to
Vicky.
conclude. Yes. So thank you again for the opportunity and your attention. And once again, apologies for this. I don't know how come the go-to application is completely collapsed on me.
That's fine, Vicky. Thank you very much for your presentation. We've run out of time, so I won't give the question. I will say two features, though, to you, Vicky, that I think are important. Clearly, your toolkit, needs to maximize a nice, large audience. So I would recommend that you try and get that up onto our marketplace. I think that would be a useful thing to do at the moment. So I'll leave that with an action on your part. And then I saw in your value proposition with the engagement with the smart cities, I think with our partners Eurocities, I don't know how much you engage with them, but we should certainly look to capitalize on their network more than anything in EU27, as we mentioned before, as good catalysts and facilitators for improving outreach from that point of view. So I think with that, I'd like to thank you, Vicky, Steve, and Mark, all three of our excellent speakers, for this very stimulating webinar. I do apologize for our blackout and Vicky's temporary blackout as well, but I think in all, we coped pretty well. Thank you very much. I wish you all a lovely afternoon, and please do just get up our last slide if we can with some information about the project to clearly join the website newsletter. Please follow us on our social media channels, which you can see on the screen as well. Access the previous webinars, which are all recorded. And if you'd like to come to our event in Vienna on the 4th of December, ICT 2018, then please do contact us. We will have a final event, so we'll be tapping into some of your brains to see if you'd like to attend that. This will probably take place possibly in Brussels around the 16th of January. So more on that very soon. Thanks once again for your patience and time. Have a lovely afternoon. Thanks again to our speakers. Final thanks to Rita, who put all this together. So thank you very much. Goodbye and have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vicky.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.